So, I've not reviewed an actually bad movie in a while, and yet, here we are. To continue our lap through a few fighting game adaptations, this time we're stopping off at Tekken, another of the larger fighting game franchises, with such coming from the staff at Namco, and then later Namco Bandai. With it being a long sordid history of the battles between Madman Heihachi Mishima, his son Kazuya, Kazuya's son Jin Kazama, the literal devils that have possessed their family line, and a long-standing cast of characters in a wacky world where anything can just go nuts.
Please don't tell me that's the bioweapon we're looking for.
That's Roger.
Overhead.
I'll never give it up! Not to anyone!
Excellent.
Yeah, Tekken is absolutely insane, though it is the only game series I know of where you can fight a versus match between a character based off of Bruce Lee, named Martial Law, and one based off of Jackie Chan, named Lei Wulong. Add in the android girl and twin assassins, the Williams sisters, and the plot of the game's largely based around stopping the machinations of Heihachi Mishima and his evil conglomerates, and you've got something fun for all the crazy that results from the series. Though as a consequence, Tekken has a very erratic release rate, with their extended periods between new installments increasing over time, which don't at all follow the release rate of new console generations. Tekken 1 and 2 originally released in the same year, 1995, Tekken 3, which completely upended the existing storyline to do a generational jump, released not long after that, Tekken 4 came out in 2001, Tekken 5 in 2005, the sixth entry in 2007, and then it taking 8 years for Tekken 7 to debut in 2015, with Tekken 8 only being announced in late 2022 for release at some time in 2023. Said release date has not been announced at the time of this recording. Like, Street Fighter might have less games to their name over a longer time overall, but you can usually expect one per console generation reliably, with a multitude of content update expansions and advanced ports to fill the space. That's not so much with this franchise, where the most new content you're likely to get from them is the cast members guest starring elsewhere. And I'm far from the first person to talk about the equally as insane adaptations of the game series. From the 90s adaptation of the first game, its middling live-action movie, and the first response to that live-action film called Blood Vengeance. The thing is, all of those films have already been more in-depthly deconstructed by those far more into and knowledgeable on Tekken than myself. Most prominently by the now semi-retired internet personality, Noah the Spoony One Antweiler.
Lions push their cubs over a cliff and raise only the ones that climb back up.
No, they don't. See, I researched it. Lions are extremely protective of their young and would never hurl them off a cliff. So basically, the instigating event that set into motion the plot of the movie and every single Tekken game is complete bullshit.
Thus, trying to do any coverage of those would basically just be retreading ground he already did perfectly, so I'm not even going to bother. Unfortunately, I have been cursed with forbidden knowledge, for there is, in fact, a fourth Tekken movie. It was made in 2014, and is a prequel to the previous live-action movie, though who made the film is more interesting than, well, pretty much everything, as such explains exactly why the live movies are awful. Who, watching this video, has ever heard of Crystal Sky Pictures? Created by Stephen Paul, Crystal Sky is basically a vanity products studio, Paul writing most of their movies or acting as a producer of them, and Stephen Paul has a consistent track record of making some of the worst movies ever made. His hand being actively felt in production of both Nick Cage's Ghost Rider films, the utterly awful Scarlett Johansson Ghost in the Shell movie, and I'm not kidding, this is 100% true, the Baby Geniuses franchise. Yeah, it gets worse. For this movie was directed by Wick Kausayananda. I have a lot of trouble saying that name, so he just goes by Wick Kaus to a lot of people. Who is best known for just one one infamous movie that co-starred Antonio Banderas and Lucy Liu, which was a notorious 0% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Yes, this Tekken movie was directed by the same man responsible for Ballistic X vs. Sever, one of the worst movies ever made. See? This is why I started talking about the creative credits, people. You can connect a lot of garbage media to the same people doing the same things every time badly. The downside to my doing this, however, is I am not as versed in Tekken lore as others might be. As said before, I am worse than casual at fighting games, and Tekken is just notoriously crazy that it's honestly difficult to engage with, as it's a pain to have a real jumping on point with the series. But knowing of the awfulness of these two creatives in specific, well, let's face it, they were going to just outright butcher Tekken anyways, so yeah, it'd be pointless to try and say, this is wrong with regards to the source material. So, going in more blind like I am, we'll see how that works out. We open the film in the post-Purge timeline, with this film's version of Kazuya Mishima, referred to in the meantime as just K, waking up with amnesia in a hotel room, as military police invade the building after him. Why are they after him? Well, that's a very simple question, and to borrow a phrase from a fellow internet reviewer, action sequence! For those who don't know anything about Stephen Paul's Tekkenverse, in the not-too-distant future, the American government collapsed, with private companies taking over all governance of the population. The movie version of Heihachi Mishima taking over the East Coast, and building from its ashes his own dystopian nation, ruled over by his own personal capital, Tekken City, which is straight up Darwinian and only those who prove their strength are allowed to live inside its borders. Yeah, no, there's a lot of dirty jobs in a city that require unskilled labor to even function. Darwinian philosophies don't apply correctly to cultures. And the precepts of evolution are not defined by outright strength, but an acceptance of diversity, allowing for the best traits for a species to survive, ultimately coming to be passed on. If you only value one type of strength, and only breed for that specific strength, then what you're breeding for eventually stagnates and becomes defective, thus defeating the point of Darwin's model of evolution, as those defects then cripple a species into extinction, as the over-specialization makes them unable to adapt to other environments and situations. This is why the strength narrative by authoritarian regimes is always nonsense, because it doesn't work. Though the funny thing is, in Tekken 2 onwards, Kazuya actually ended up doing this exact thing with Hokkaido through just sheer financial power of the Mishima Zaibatsu. Though that's after the devil-possessing Kazuya made him go full-on evil, so... But yeah, this Kazuya doesn't know why they're after him, escaping from their assaults, only to be hit by a car.
Help. Help me.
This is not why you call an Uber, lady. Kazuya wakes up in the hands of what I presume to be some form of religious cult. The film's wiki says it's a guerrilla group, but really they seem more like a cult than anything. Where their leader, the minister, rambles at him without word, meaning, or even seemingly stage direction.
At the end of days, many will be excluded from the book of life. The first to be consumed by fire and brimstone will be the cowards.
What in God's holy name are you blathering about?
Again, directed by the same guy as one of the worst action movies ever made. Banderas and Liu deserved so much better than that movie. He reveals he implanted a bomb in Kazuya's chest, threatening him to work for him for their goals, despite there being no reason for why he'd want him for this. Maybe he wanted the power of the American Ninja Warrior on his side, I don't know. King Kosugi, who is playing Kazuya in this film, is the son of Sho Kosugi, who was the star of a bunch of 1980s ninja films, in specific, Enter the Ninja and its sequels. And Sho's work was primarily responsible for the American pop culture zeitgeist about ninjas. Kane himself is ranked 98th in the Ninja Warrior competition, Sasuke, and to date, the only individual of American origin to ever get to the competition's final stage. And if you feel like you know the name from elsewhere, well, we'll get to that later.
I'll give you a demonstration. Look at this man. This man. I had issues with him.
They talk like this throughout the entire movie. It's cyclical, eating the runtime of the movie like an Ouroboros serpent. This film could likely end up half its length by just cutting out the unnecessary dialogue.
Over 1 billion people believed in Allah, over 2 billion in Jesus Christ, and a few in L. Ron Hubbard.
I have no idea who you're talking about.
Neither do I! Why is this here? But since Kazuya has amnesia, instead of just telling him he's Kazuya, they nickname him K. Because ZOMFG last act reveal setup despite these idiots specifically doing this to him because of who he is. You know, if you're supposed to be rebels instead of a cult, then getting the son of the man who's caused your suffering on your side when he's in a state of vulnerability, with expectation that he will at some point take over his dad's position to then be able to help you all out of suffering, is a damn smarter thing to do than just trying to kill him. They of course don't actually tell him anything about what he's supposed to be doing as part of this dystopian cult, who, as they seize their daily activities, don't even seem to be doing anything. Beyond at least the minister trying to birth a private army.
Peace comes at a price, and for the privilege, you will learn to kill. May rid the violence of the sinners.
You're going to have people fight and kill in your name to end the fighting and killing in the world. Yeah, that checks out for a cult. Though the way they showcase this is really stupid. The minister's elite disciples, who are apparently modeled after a very terrible interpretation of the assassins Nina and Anna Williams, but it can't be them as they were used as characters in the first movie already, are shown training their own skills, and not those of their lesser, who they are just killing in their exercise en masse. Like, if you only have a few elite fighters and you use them to kill everyone you want on your side, you're not going to get anywhere fast.
Now finish them.
I'm not a murderer.
How do you know? In here, you make mistake, you die.
Again, while the synopses of this film all say this is a guerrilla army, in practice this is a cult. But Kazuya, thanks to him being the American Ninja Warrior, proves himself to be better than some of these elite fighters, earning himself a few privileges in this compound, ultimately befriending the facility's janitor. But Kazuya's refusal to needlessly kill his opponents leads to the minister forcing him to start either killing them, or he'll kill the janitor guy instead. And again I ask, why? You guys realize that your forces improve from learning from failure and training more, right? That death is the final consequence of failure, not the price that must be paid for failing, right? There's literally no reason to do this, both internally or externally around the film. Evil Overlord Rule 45, dude! You don't do this! That point becomes moot, however, when the minister is asked to have his elites do a job to kill a drug cartel leader. That happens to be a pedophile. See, this is what I was talking about with this driving him to kill thing. If you want an assassin, then having them kill people who have done nothing to them is pointless, as they're just viewed as innocent by a normal person. But if you tell them someone is awful, or doing horrible things to others, and killing them will protect other people from them, then it's a lot more simple to lead them down the slippery slope into insanity. The minister's tactics before were making the amnesiac Kazuya more resistant to the desire to kill others in this whole training scheme, only reinforcing his desire to kill those who are subservient to the minister, who is the root to all his struggles, as opposed to building a rapport that will put him on the minister's side. His first mission successful, Kazuya is granted a small apartment, which he begins to use to find out who he was, ultimately saving his neighbor Laura from... I don't even know.
I like pretty things.
Don't! That was my mother's!
Not your mama's.
I'd ask if these actors were paid to act, but I think it's more accurate to say that the director could not be bothered to actually direct. Like, look at all of what's going on here. From sexual harassment to mugging to... What, is this a hostage situation now? And then he just cheeses it? What is even the point of this? Beyond, of course, Laura purportedly being Kazuya's love interest for the film. Despite, well, remember, this is a prequel to the 2009 film, where its protagonist Jin Kazama was raised by his mother June, just like in the original Tekken games, who's a solo mom that wants nothing to do with Jin's biological father, who is our protagonist for this film, Kazuya. If this was in any way a competent film, or actually attempting to line up with that earlier movie, then the one they would be introducing here would ideally be June. And June be a character in this film for the purpose of setting up Jin's, well, conception. So you have connections tying the two together to expand on the failed elements of the first film. Thus, without factoring in at all actual Tekken lore, this film is an absolute failure as it's acting in contradiction with the sole movie it should stay aligned with. Hell, even for a prequel, there's actually more wrong the more you think about it. Kane Kosugi was 39 when he played this role, and he's 4 years older than Ian Anthony Dale, who played Kazuya in the 2009 film, when he was at the time straight up 30. This is not a young Kazuya we're seeing played here, but one that should exist after the events of the first film instead of the reverse. And despite the legitimate martial ability Kosugi does have to call upon for this, it's pretty clear that they weren't trying to sell a young Kazuya being portrayed as they needed to for a purported origin story for all of this. Still, Kazuya carries out more operations for the minister, which I don't see the point of, as we're told nothing about any of them and how they improve anything in this broken world. As a lot of what we see is imagery without context, which is another infamous downfall of Callis' directing. He has a lot of scenes that you think are supposed to mean something to pad out the films, but end up absent of context to why they are there, and thus end up meaningless. Why are they here? Well, they're here for one reason. To fill time. We are halfway through the film, and nothing has happened. And you think that as the second act seems to start, that something would begin to happen. And yet, no, not really.
So, you just moved in, huh?
Yeah, like over a month ago, if what frames of time we've gotten in for such has passed. Hell, while I didn't play it in the scene right before this, she said that saving her from the mugging happened days ago, and between those scenes was another time skip. However, one of the missions leads Kazuya back to the hotel this all started at, getting a lead to his identity that he wants to follow up on, only for the minister's next assignment to waylay that. Said assignment is to try and take down the movie's version of Brian Fury, another long-standing staple character of the Tekken franchise. And also played by Gary Daniels, who portrayed Brian in the prior live-action movie, as the cyborg incarnation of the character. And you would think, for an actor to reprise their role in a prequel, that such would be setting up for why they are a cyborg in the prior film that is set later. But that would be good writing, which this is not. And Brian soundly kicks Kazuya's ass, to confirm for pretty much everyone that this really isn't in any way Kazuya. But as Brian in turn reveals, the reason why the minister wanted Brian dead was he used to have Kazuya's job until he himself left. The people Kazuya's been killing? Yeah, they're not the worst of humanity. They're the minister's rivals in this cesspool for territory and control. And Kazuya's been part of the minister's wetworks team to maintain his power base.
Are we the baddies?
Don't you question the minister's motive sometimes? Don't you think maybe he talks a good game, but something's not right?
He really doesn't, though. He's rambling more than half the time incoherently. I cannot explain why Kazuyas even following the guy.
He can't just kill everyone.
Yes, he can.
No, he can't. The only reason he gets away with it is because you all enable him. I feel like I should be inserting the "I feel like I'm taking crazy pills" clip from Zoolander, but I'd end up using it after every conversation. Did no one proofread this? But realizing his time's limited, Kazuya gets Laura, who's revealed to have some talents as a medic, to get the bomb the minister stuck in him taken out, allowing him to go rogue after Brian reveals how deep in hell he's gotten.
I don't know who I am, but I know what I'm doing is right. And so do you.
You were just told everything you've been doing is based on a lie, and given evidence to support such, after stating how you believed that what you were doing was wrong, and the minister was lying to them. What the hell? Though Kazuya's partner in his ops, Rhoda, is convinced to swap sides to backstab the minister after Brian shows additional evidence, Kazuya acting as bait, just so Rhoda can do the job herself, as she's been his pawn for longer. And this happened at the 70-minute mark of an 88-minute movie, for Laura is discovered to have been kidnapped by the minister's other assassins, and taken to a factory owned by a company called Gentech that operates out of these slums. Why was she taken here? I have no idea. It's not implied that the ministers ordered it, and those guarding it don't look like his goon squad, nor is it inferred the twins were working for anyone else, or they were made aware of the minister dying to sell their services to another. They're just here because they were antagonists? ? That needed resolution. And even then, they're curb-stomped, just so Kazuya can get to the confrontation with the only other actor to return from the first film, Shang Tsung himself, Kari Hiroyuki Tagawa, as Heihachi Mishima. Though it feels so wrong to see Heihachi in a suit like that. Hell, they didn't even dress up Kari Tagawa to have either the Mishima eyebrows or even Heihachi's flared-up hair. You can really tell they weren't even trying with this one.
In ancient Sparta, male children were sent into the wilderness to live on their own. Only those who survived were allowed to rejoin the clan.
Okay, this certainly mimicked the original animated movie. And to echo Spoony's own rebuke of the lions thing, no they weren't. Spartan children were sent to training camps, where they were overseen by senior Spartan trainers, who were led through extremely harsh survival training for the purpose of physically strengthening them for life in service as a soldier, whose services were mandatory for all men up to a certain age. It was the conflicts Sparta got into that would decide whether those boys would survive to an age by which they could return to their families, and in turn seek to start their own, if they even managed to reach the age of 30. Spartan society was ridiculously sexist and classist like that, with its ultimate downfall coming from their hyper-rigid structure that once enough force was exerted against it, it collapsed, with the ones who defeated the Spartans, the Thebans, doing so to put an end to the Spartans' tyranny and free all the peoples the Spartans had enslaved and abused daily to maintain power over. Like, as much as the legend of the ancient Spartans has been romanticized over the ages, the reality is, they were pretty much the bad guys of ancient Greece, and their civilization collapsed because they were not able to adapt with the times due to how rigid and oppressive it was. But yeah, Heihachi, for this same stupid reason, had his scientists erase Kazuya's memory just so he could go through this survival challenge to become a hyper-talented killing machine because there is no reason. Heihachi in the games wanted his sickly son to become strong, so put him up against impossible challenges, with it ultimately reaching the point that Heihachi thought he had killed him and felt remorseful for it. The reality was these acts ended up awakening a literal spiritual demon in Kazuya's soul, which he had inherited from his mother, that gave him the strength to come back and defeat his dad. Before that in turn drove Kazuya crazy into becoming a villain in the series. But the failing of all the Tekken films is, they don't explain that. Not a single one of them do. despite that serving as the central backbone of their conflict. And it's certainly not the live-action ones that basically do away with all of the spiritual demons and magic and life force-based energy powers crap that makes so many fighting games fun. Like, hell, give me the King of Fighters live-action film over this. For as much as they get Mai Shiranui and Terry Bogard wrong, they at least tried to include some of the supernatural stuff that popped up in SNK. And without that supernatural backbone for any of this, it likewise leaves any relationship between this family inexplicable, not even attempting to give a valid justification for why Heihachi would do any of this.
Let's finish this.
I'm just getting started.
And after Heihachi shows off how he's just as easily brainwashed Laura, he just kills her. Again, why? Like, she's been a non-character in this story. There's no point to this. Hell, she didn't even have a character, so it's hard to even call this fridging. I felt nothing from this. Regardless, it is time for the American Ninja Warrior to face off against his father. No, that's when Kane and his real father Sho fought each other in another series Kane was starring in at the time. And yes, we're gypped out of there even being a fight between them, in part because Kari Tagawa by this point is too old to be an active fighter. It instead handed off to two other throwaway goons as the final fight of this film, Kazuya meeting back up with Rhoda, and deciding that the pair are going to set their sights on bringing down Heihachi Mishima and his entire nation. Which we know does not happen, once again, because this is a prequel, where in the movie this supposedly leads into, Kazuya is then a member of the family business under Heihachi, who is secretly planning to usurp him. And if he's secretly planning to usurp him from within, then it makes Heihachi an imbecile to even consider letting him in like that, after deliberately making Kazuya want to kill him like this out of vengeance after he was trained as an assassin. But regardless, that's their goal. Kazuya pursuing it with all the power he has as the American Ninja Warrior.
He likes to play games. Let's give him some games.
And those powers include his own giant robots.
Black Gamma!
Yeah, that's what Ken Kosugi's most known for, being the literal American Ninja Warrior in Super Sentai series Kaku Ranger, which, as much as I have problems with this series, is a far better showcase of the guy than this movie, as this film just has no reason to exist. As the movie is absolutely nothing. And I mean that. Nothing in it really happens. There is not made to be any weight or meaning to its events. Kazuya's amnesia is a non-issue for 90% of the film beyond making him a clean slate, so nothing of the character he's based off of shines through. We see all of 3 total Tekken characters, so this isn't built off of game lore. Hell, change the names and it has nothing to do with the games. Even taking it on its own merits dissociated from them and just trying to prequel the first movie fails, as it barely has any connection to it. And it's telling that this film was not written while at all referencing or considering any plot or content from the first film. Having seen the first live-action Tekken movie myself, and not just Spoony's old review of it, the first Tekken movie at least superficially resembled a condensed transliteration of the plot of some of the later Tekken games, has a focus on the growth of a martial artist, and even centers around a tournament that acts as a means by which for the disenfranchised to have a voice in an elitist world by winning their way into having a voice. It screws itself over by the end by a nonsensical shift in focus in its back half, but at least it seemed like it in part made an attempt. This? There's nothing. Hell, there's so much of there being nothing, it's not even worth getting angry or insulted over it, beyond the reality that one paid money to buy the movie that contains an absolution of nothing to begin with. I kind of feel bad for Kane Kosugi for him being suckered into this. The man's tried acting in both Japan and America for a long, long time, And despite his tenure on Kakuranger and the record he set among the top 100 competitors of Sasuke and other projects he's done, he was also Ryu Hayabusa in the Dead or Alive film adaptation. Stuff's never seemed to really work out for him. And despite how awful the direction of this film is, his performance, I would say, still stands out to showcase him as a decent actor even after all this time. I'd like to recommend another more recent role of his, but a lot of the time he's just ended up as cannon fodder more often than not, the only exception to this being him reprising his role as Ultraman Powered. As before Kakuranger, he did play the host of Powered, Kenichi Kai, in their 1993 series. So when the character returned for Ultra Galaxy Fight, he was asked to come back to voice him. But that's about it. You know, I swear this has to be a The Producers styled scam going on with Crystal Sky Pictures movies. Absolutely none of them make any money. Not even to the point of making back their budgets. The first Tekken film didn't even break $2 million on a budget of $30 million. And this one, its box office return was $9,000. Yes, only $9,000. I don't know what this movie's budget was, but I would doubt that its budget was more than $10 million. Every movie Crystal Sky has made has lost money, so how are they still a company? But I guess that's a question better left to a forensic accountant. At the very least, as far as we know, this film did so badly it tanked any plan to do anything more with the franchise in cinematic form for a while. So maybe when the next Tekken game comes around, someone else will look into giving something better than these a shot. For us, however, our next fighting game adaptation will be sending us to a much darker place.